Hello, everyone. Today I am looking at Mass Effect. Man, it's been a while since this game came out. I still remember just how cool it felt at the time. It's funny actually because this is essentially a BioWare game, and prior to this, what they were most known for, at least to me, were the Knights of the Old Republic franchise of Star Wars games, which were amazing, frankly. They were so cool. However, those games were kind of on a active turn-based combat system, so it was really exciting to see that this game, Mass Effect, was a completely new IP, a fully functional 3D shooter, and there were no traces of any turn-based gameplay at all. So I thought, oh, this is going to be really good. And well, it was. It is. It's a really great game. I think what this game has more so than its successors is that it just has a certain mood. It's a little bit janky in some places, but honestly, I kind of like that or prefer that. While the actual other ones are more action-oriented, this one is more concise and or rather precise, and you kind of work around, or with the gameplay. But yeah, this is the beginning of a franchise that I think was one of my favorite franchises of the seventh generation. It, along with No More Heroes and Assassin's Creed, it really formed kind of that era of gaming in my mind, that this was a new technology was possible, and this is what people were able to create with the full potential, and still with new ideas and new IPs. And this was kind of almost like a launch game, almost a launch game. It came out pretty early on the 360's lifespan, and it was kind of the typical Western sci-fi whatever. And gosh, just everything about this game is so well designed. Everything from the armor to the guns, to the Geth, for example, even Saren's design. Everything in this game is just really well made. Like even all the guns and how they work, the sound effects, everything about this game, it just feels like a brand new IP, which it is, and it just feels so good. They obviously took a lot from Knights of the Old Republic, but it's really, they really revamped everything, so it's really hard to see that there is like a direct reference to anything from Star Wars. They really made their own kind of thing. And if anything, I would say that this game more so resembles a Star Trek game in a way. Because you are on the captain of a ship, you travel from planet to planet, you have your crew on the ship, and you deal with issues as you kind of go through each mission, and you also choose who to bring with you. And a big thing about Mass Effect were the relationships, the fact that depending on who you brought, who you spent time with, more so in the other games, but they kind of have the impression in this game that what you say in dialogue to a character will affect them. And instead of having the good force, evil force points system in the old games, you now have Paragon and Renegade. So that system is basically still here, but it's just implemented in different ways. What's also nice is that the dialogue trees are very simplified. So you're going to have your top right options kind of being your good options or your more sensible options. Your side options in the wheel are going to be kind of more neutral, and then the bottom options on the wheel of I think there's 6 sections usually, are going to be your kind of more renegade options usually. And it's kind of in the later games, but when you actually do have a distinct Paragon action, it will actually show up in blue, but not here in this game. So what is the basic premise of Mass Effect? Well, again, I love how this game starts. It just goes off on a great pacing. You basically are a human commander that, at the beginning of the game, you have to choose things like you're a class, of which there are about a dozen, and they all kind of are variations between, wielding of weapons, wielding of biotic powers, and wielding of technical powers. And so you can choose one that, is exactly one of those, or one that is an in between. So, for example, I played Infiltrator, which was a wielding of guns and technical powers. And so that meant that my character was really skilled at sniper rifles and pistols, I believe, and it also had weird technical skills and hacking abilities. So that's kind of my, loadout. That's what I really enjoy. Just another thing that I noticed, that this was the first game that I played where I realized, wow, this is actually lifelike graphics. Maybe it's hard to see or tell, but there were definitely some next gen games that came out, at the beginning of 7th generation, that at least were called next gen games, but they still kind of had that blurry kind of Metal Gear Solid 3 effect where people's faces were still kind of cartoony. This was the first time I was like, oh, that's a real person's face. And this is the first time I was actually shocked that games were getting so realistic that it was almost a little bit scary, you could say. Aside from that, you also choose your background. So you might, have been a street kid, or, worked at the academy or something, or maybe you were a settler on a far out Earth colony. Those options honestly kind of don't really matter. I've only seen them come up a couple times in the overall story. But yeah, it's just a nice little thing to choose from, I guess. Anyway, how does the game actually start? Well, the story, as I said, takes up really well. So you are the commander of this human ship, and humans are kind of a newcomer to the galaxy, which is a federation of different alien races. And so again, it's already feeling a lot more like Star Trek, and you basically go to this new Earth colony called Eden Prime, which has basically been attacked by this alien force of the Geth, and you have to find out what has occurred and taken place there. And the Geth are kind of half organic, mostly synthetic beings that essentially take other beings and turn them into husks by extracting their genetic material and turning them into these zombie-like creatures. And so you go down here to investigate, and you find out essentially that you find this ancient artifact that was being extracted by another alien race called the Marker. No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Dead Space. I forget what it's called. I think it's called the Beacon or something, but it's more or less the same thing as the Marker from Dead Space. So essentially this thing shows up, and suddenly it basically flashes you with a vision of a prophecy of kind of the end times. And essentially what's going to occur is that you have a premonition of another ancient alien race called the Reapers. And this race or armada of ships is coming to destroy essentially the galaxy. And you basically have to warn the rest of the galaxy that this threat is coming. And of course, when you do so, they don't believe you, and they're like, well, you have to find proof. And so what you do is you approach this council made up of alien races, and they're very distrusting of humanity and not very compassionate towards them. And so you have a little political thing where you have to work with the human ambassador to the alien hierarchy of the world, and you basically have to work alongside them to basically secure diplomatic relations. And they're like, well, this is making us look bad. I'm not sure if we should actually do this. And so what they do is they say, all right, we'll allow you to go out into this, into the galaxy and find evidence, and we'll also give you the title of Spectre, which is essentially like the special police. And so with this title, you can now go and do kind of whatever you want. Of course, it's funny, though, because when people meet you, they're like, a human Spectre, that's like unheard of. That's like stupid. No one would believe that you're actually a Spectre and a human. So even though you have this title, a lot of people just don't believe you, and you have to do things the old-fashioned way, or the hard way, rather. And of course, you have a rival Spectre called Saren, who basically you saw at this place that was trying to extract the beacon, and essentially you're accusing him of being a renegade Spectre that is allying himself with the Geth and the Reaper to bring about this destruction of the galaxy, and he is essentially the top-ranking Spectre in the galaxy, so the council and people obviously don't believe you. Thus begins your rivalry with this other Spectre, who is a I actually forget the name of the alien race he is, but regardless of that, throughout the story you also recruit different types of aliens and humans to your crew of intergalactic space travel, discovery, and exploration. So 2 of them you get on the very first planet you visit, since it's a human colony, which are Kaidan Alenko and Ashley Smith, I think. I forget her last name. And so you have, of course, a male counterpart and a female counterpart. Ashley, funnily enough, is more so geared towards soldiery and pure combat abilities, while Kaidan is skilled in biotics. So the main reason why the game is called Mass Effect is actually derived from a technology. And so in the opening credit scroll of the game, it says that essentially humanity investigates Mars, and they find this new technology that essentially this new element called Element Zero, if you electrify it and send an electric current through it, it will shrink down and compress matter into a confined, compressed space. And so it's this really cool thing where, by compressing matter in an engine, you can get a slip space drive, and your matter can basically travel faster than light. And so that's what they call a slip space engine. And so it's kind of funny that this effect is called Mass Effect. Because it compresses mass, and that's literally why the game is called that, and it's based around this one technology that they find, and in combination with this other thing called the Relay. And the Relay is this giant floating ancient alien object that allows you to electrify and push the ship essentially across a galaxy, and these giant relays are the devices that allow humanity and other alien races to actually travel through space efficiently and correctly. Of course, what you find out later is that the relays themselves, again, were made by a much more ancient alien race, and that will fit into the Reapers at some point, and the entire story honestly is fascinating, and it borrows a lot from their previous game, the Sith Lords, but in terms of the conceptually who the enemy is, but it's still really, really cool. I love honestly the story in the Sith Lords. It's really fascinating. Other crew members you get, of course, the very famous Garrus, who again is, he has this very kind of aquiline, bird-like, look to him from, his race. He also has these 4 mandibles he talks with. He's a really interesting character, very fun, and also just his overall, he has a special voice toner, I guess you could say, that his voice just sounds very distinct and interesting. Liara, who is this blue race of blue beings who essentially are an all-female clan and essentially can live for hundreds, if not thousands of years. She's a scientist that, is starting her research, and you basically help her, study the Geth and escape from, an attack. And she's more or less a humanoid creature, but I forget what her deal is. With Garrus's race, they're more of a militant race, similar to the humans, and if I'm being completely honest, they reminds me of the elites from Halo. While Liara's race is part of this kind of nurturing, maternal, and motherly wisdom kind of race, similar to, I don't know, the Vestal Virgins of Rome, I guess. It's the only thing that comes to mind. Not to say that they are not chaste. They do have reproductive relations with other races and themselves. And I forget how they reproduce, but you meet one of the matriarchs on the Citadel, which is also the main hub world in the galaxy where all the races come, and it's like the United Nations. Aside from that, there are also the Solarians, who essentially are these bug-like race who only live about 40 years or something, and so they can breed super quickly. They're super smart, super talented, but they only live like 40 to 60 years, so they have things called breeding contracts in their society. So they can basically reproduce, extremely quickly and in large volume, but it has to be super controlled. And they're an interesting race, I guess I would say. And then finally, you have Rex the Krogan, and the Krogans are essentially a more how I would say a more violent race than humanity. The humans are kind of seen as a violent, uneducated race, but the Krogans are a race that is so awful and so violent that essentially the history of the race is that they nuked their own planet through just constant warfare. They're kind of a reptilian, armored, almost like an armored turtle kind of look to them, and they essentially are all about war, and they were used by the other alien races to wage war against each other until they were realized to be too dangerous, and they were given the genophage, which is essentially a medical procedure that they gave to the Krogans that made them all sterile. And now the amount of fertile Krogans left is really dwindling, and they're basically about to go extinct in the next few generations. Obviously, they want to help preserve their race and save it from extinction, and that will play also into the overall story. There's also the long-lost race of the Rachni, which were essentially, if you would imagine, Zerg, basically, this insectoid race that apparently ravaged the galaxy. It was so bad that all of the other races rose up to destroy them. They're essentially the space bugs of this universe. And in fact, there's one mission where you find Rachni Queen, the last remaining one, and you have to imagine if you want to let it go or destroy it. And depending on your decision, it will, I guess, affect the rest of the story. There are also other races you meet that you just don't recruit into your party. Such as the Hanar, which are this extremely peaceful race that kind of float around and speak in a different kind of way where they see themselves as a collective, so they always refer to themselves as we or this one. There are also the Volus, which are this almost like the grunts from Halo, just way fatter. They essentially breathe exclusively on a mixture of methane and nitrogen or something, and they always wear these suits that they have to walk around in, and they're kind of these either merchants or these odd kind of funny looking creatures. They're usually comic relief characters. I don't think I've ever seen one taken seriously throughout the entire campaign. And there's also finally the Batarians, and the Batarians essentially are seen as what they think humanity is. They're very humanoid. They're similar in structure and size. The only difference is that they have 4 eyes. And the Batarians are nothing but smugglers, kind of drug lords, and essentially they're basically all criminals in the galaxy. And so there's quite a few missions where Shepard will just have to take out a Batarian stronghold. And they're just assholes, frankly, and they're true to their reputation. In fact, I'm sure there's a little bit of DLC in Mass Effect 1, and it was really strange because I don't really remember what it was, because it was so rough and weird and kind of new. But as I recall, the DLC in Mass Effect 1 was essentially you just got more outposts to attack and go to, and most of them were just all Batarians that you just slaughtered, And so there's a running meme that Batarians are just like the worst out of all the races of the aliens. And not only that, not only they're violent, but they're also kind of seen as slightly dumber than the humans. And so it's funny, I was going to say the Krogans are obviously an import of the Mandalorians from Knights of the Republic. So they have this warrior code among their people. They're very clan-like. One clan is better than the other, like sports teams, basically. They're highly violent, but also highly honor-bound. And and built towards their their people, and they basically will always want to fight anyone in order to prove themselves. And it's mostly males. A female Krogan essentially is something that's highly guarded and rarely ever seen. And there's not even one in this game. But anyway, that is most of the types of characters you're going to meet throughout the galaxy. Again, the strongest components of this game is probably the dialogue. Even the cutscenes are pretty good, and even the gameplay is acceptable. As I said, from the dialogue, it'll choose if you're like good points or evil points, which will allow different kind of dialogue options to pop up in main story events and allow you to either save certain characters or destroy certain enemies. Again, like a lot of the story is imported from the Old Republic, and so the Reapers are essentially the old Sith, essentially waiting out in deep space. And it's so sad that Knights of the Republic 2 ended on this massive, super cool cliffhanger, and then we never really got a conclusion to it. Quickly, I guess I'll talk about the gameplay. So it is actually a cover shooter. It's very rough, kind of, but it's not that rough as I'd expected was, or expected to be. You have a little explosive in the environment you can shoot. Enemies have shields, and then they have their health bar. If you wait too long, their shields will recharge. You also have a shield and regenerating health. You also have grenades by pressing the back button, which kind of fly around in a really cool way, and then you press it again to explode. This game has a combination of pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, snipers, and everything works on a heatsink system. So essentially, you can keep firing until it overheats, and then it'll kind of like have to cool down for a while. And of course, each character has a skill, a list of skills, and you kind of put points into each one of those areas, and they unlock new and different things. So for example, for my infiltrator, I had I forget what it's called, like a hot hack or something. And so it was this thing that was kind of like a flame-based thing that went out and overrided, electric circuits. And since the Geth are mainly electric race, it would fry their circuits essentially. You can also use the D-pad to direct where you want your squad mates to go. It's frankly completely useless, and I never used it throughout the game because they'll just. Because the combat environments are always so small that they're gonna always be just in front of the enemy at all times, and they're not super useful. But your allies will fight alongside you, but you cannot play as any of your allies. Again, a lot of this game is taking place in cover, which you use by doing the A button. You press B to melee, and you zoom in with L and shoot. Use R to shoot. You press Y to apply Metagel, which is like the universal Bacta, or a health component of this game. You also have this cool thing. It's actually a really cool design called an Omni Tool, and this is kind of like your PDA on your arm, which is this whole orange effect that's really, really cool. And you basically use that to communicate with other people, hack certain things. Hacking mini games are just pressing a series of buttons. Aside from the on-the-foot missions, a larger and major part of the game is also the Mako missions, which is funny that they never really brought back. They kind of brought it back in the DLC for 3, but it shows you how much, I guess, people disliked it. I guess I love the Mako missions. So whenever you land on a planet, so the way it's really smart how they handle this, because obviously this is not No Man's Sky. You cannot land and travel on every planet, and even if you do, it's a very set kind of grid or frame or chart, and there's nothing else outside of it. And so when you land there, you can go on foot, by yourself, but they also give you this kind of mobile tank thing that you use to basically navigate the environment. And it usually typically has moon gravity. Pretty much every planet has moon gravity, so that you never get stuck. But the Mako tank itself is just a really cool device. You can press A to launch the thrusters, and so you can get out of tight situations. But again, this game has that old school kind of janking feeling to it, where essentially you can totally get stuck where the game does not intend you to go at all, and it's so fun because there's just nothing you can do. You might have to like restart the map. It happens rarely, but you know when you can get stuck. And so you also have this giant turret on top of the tank. One of them is a machine gun, and the other one is a cannon. And you basically have to go through these sections of the main quest, even where you have to take out Geth strongholds using this cannon and this tank. And honestly, I thought they were a lot of fun. You know, being able to shoot things. It gets a little bit repetitive when you have so many enemies, but I thought it was great. It was a lot of fun. I love the Mako. And I'm glad they kind of sort of brought it back in the Mass Effect 3 DLC. It was a different vehicle, but the same concept. You basically go to 3 or 4 major planets throughout the game. Each character has a kind of quest line there, essentially. There's going to be a local thing that you have to solve, you know, at the normal level for the people there, but it branches out into the overall story that, of course, the Hand of Saren is moving against all these separate things in order to bring about the Reapers and the Geth supremacy. And there's a very cool thing near the end where essentially Saren has been actually mind-controlled by the Geth and the Reapers, and you come into contact with a Reaper itself near the end, and it tries to mind-control you. So there's this really cool thing where near the end of the game, you know, one of the final boss fights is actually Saren, but if you have a certain dialogue and you've, you know, spec'd into a certain way, you can actually completely skip the Saren boss fight if you can choose the right dialogue. And I love it when games give you that option to use a different kind of a process and that actually matters. You know, if you spec into charisma or some other weird stat, it actually pays off big in the end. And you know, besides the characters that you use in combat, the characters on your ship have a lot of charisma themselves. For example, your main pilot Joker is a pretty funny, sarcastic, you know, guy who unfortunately is wheelchair bound because he lost his use of his legs in some kind of accident. You also have Dr. Chakwas, who is the main doctor on the ship, and you also have your main lieutenant that gives you information updates, and you can have little fun conversations with all these characters. And as you level up through the game, you also get different points to spend on your skill table, essentially unlocking new powers, new biotics, for example. If you are a biotic user, a lot of that stuff is things like force fields, a lot of force powers. You know, you can use a black hole, you can push things. Something that's really fun in this game, even if you're not using the biotics, your teammates can. And you know, Kaiden will send, you know, some kind of, you know, force biotic bomb, which will essentially make the characters or enemies float in the sky while you shoot them gracefully. And I should have mentioned earlier, but the reason that biotics even exist is that they have adapted to the element Zero in their bodies and can use it to contort space and matter around them, which frankly makes sense considering what the Mass Effect initially was. The end of the game is really, really fun and really cool. You kind of have this military assault mission followed up by another mission where you kind of go to the ancient homeworld of the ancient alien race that you know, what built all of these ancient tech, and you find out the ultimate warning and the big story behind everything. I feel like Mass Effect 1's story is actually my favorite and the best, and I really think it's my favorite, just along with the aesthetic. The main menu alone has the coolest vibe to it and has kind of become the main theme of the series, and it's just almost a lullaby-esque kind of theme that's really relaxing and nice and cool. One thing that everyone hated about this game though, were the elevators. Oh my god, the elevators on the Citadel were essentially the loading, the loading screens between certain places. So you'd just be in this elevator stuck for like what felt like a good minute, if not more. And it is just almost unbearable, just how painful it is to just sit and stand there. And I think some of the characters make sometimes a little bit of dialogue. I'm joking about how long the elevators used to take in the later games, but yeah, that's a funny little thing. Also, something that's really fun is that depending on who you take with you on a mission, if they know either some of the antagonists or they know something else, they'll have special dialogue just for that part. So there's a lot of, I would guess, interest or pressure on choosing the right characters to bring along with you. And you're always in a squad of 3. But yeah, there's one planet where you have to investigate this biological, parasite that's taking over the planet. Another one, you have to go to this secret tech lab. Noveria has one of my favorite themes ever. It's just so cool sounding, and it's this snow planet. Also, in each planet, there are, of course, side quests. People ask you to help them with their personal problems and their little issues as you go along the main quest. And depending on what you choose, you can make different outcomes happen, obviously. Anyway, this is the game that really started the whole sort of sci-fi epic franchise by BioWare, and so I can't really help but love it. It's an amazing, well-told story, and I think it's almost my favorite out of all 3. Yeah, so I think with all that said, Mass Effect, I love this game. It's really cool, has a great story, great characters, and good combat. So what else can you ask for? It is basically a classic at this point. Anyway, guys, I'll see you later. See ya.